What up, everybody? At the end of BMF Season 3, Episode 1, as Meech was on the phone with Terry, telling him about the Atlanta highways, he started joking with Terry, then told Terry that he's always been an easy target. Because of that statement, some were led to believe that Meech was hinting that he was actually behind his brother's shooting at the beginning of Season 1 that cost Terry his vision in one of his eyes. But this is not the case at all. We got to keep in mind that BMF is based on a real-life story, and that Meech bases his whole BMF organization on trust and loyalty, and said in BMF Season 2, if you're not a stand-up guy, then you can just go ahead and get out. And this will be very interesting to see how that works out moving forward for Meech as he recruits members to BMF, and exactly how he decides upon who he's going to do business with or not. Because in the streets and in the drug game, trust and loyalty are very hard to find. Because in my time spent in the game, personally, I only met a handful of stand-up guys. Everyone else was snakes. But from everything I heard about Meech, he's definitely a stand-up guy, and it's not even his nature to do some stuff like that. So Meech being behind Terry's shooting should be completely out of the question. Also keep in mind that Meech is all about family. Going back to Season 2 when they first got put on with Cena. Meech first rented out the whole movie theater for all the children in the neighborhood to watch a movie. Then he rented out the skating rink again for the whole neighborhood. While Meech was doing this, also buying his mother and little sister outfits to wear to the skating rink, Terry was taking Markeisha out to expensive dinners and taking her shopping. When Markeisha couldn't decide on what coat she wanted, Terry decided to buy them all. Getting me to the real meaning of Meech telling Terry that he's always been an easy target. This is going all the way back to the young Meech and T scenes from Season 1. Simply meaning Meech has always picked on T, no different than most sibling relationships. For example, when Meech was first going to meet up with Pat, Terry wanted to go with him, and Meech told him that he wasn't taking his Poindexter with him nowhere. Poindexter basically a term for nerd or geek back in those days. There was also a scene from their childhood when there was no milk for Terry to eat his cereal with, and his mother said, "Boy, you weren't born with no silver spoon in your mouth. Use your brother's leftover milk." Soon as Lucille said that, Meech was right next to Terry like he was a good brother, laughing, offering up his milk, and said, "Here you go, bro." Basically clowning Terry that he had to use his leftover milk to eat his cereal. At the same time, stuff like this is why Meech decided to get into the drug game in the first place. Then there was another scene from Meech and T's childhood when Meech woke up to find T cooking himself a triple burger, only to look in the fridge to find that Terry only left enough meat for Meech and Nicole to split a small burger. When Meech saw that, he called Terry selfish, going back to what I already talked about to open up the video, where Meech wasn't only thinking about himself, but was also thinking about his younger sister Nicole, while Terry was only thinking about himself. Part of the reason why their relationship has this dynamic is Meech being the older brother. But Terry then told Meech that he wasn't going to split the burger, and the two then got into a fight and broke Lucille's china. This caused Lucille to whip both Meech and Terry, and the narrator OG Meech said whatever he had to go through, he always knew that his brother would be right there by his side. Another very important dynamic of these two brothers' relationship, that they bond through adversity. The other scene that showed young Meech and T together was just as important to their backstory as the rest, as it showed them watching a basketball game with Roland, and Roland was imitating shooting the basketball like the players on TV. When Meech and T turned the TV, and the narrator OG Meech said him and T wanted to be like the Chambers brother, who the movie New Jack City was based on, and YBI, Young Boys Incorporated, who all the Detroit D-Boys patterned themselves after. So we could see from a very early age that Meech and T's mutual interest was the drug game. Both of them growing up looking up to drug dealers and also getting at the game at a very early age. The dynamics showed in these few childhood scenes together are very important details of Meech and T's relationship. First off, the older brother Meech picking on Terry, the younger brother, that we saw in two of the scenes. Pretty much why Meech said that T has always been an easy target. Part of the reason why is that T is serious all the time. Possibly Meech is trying to get him to loosen up. Meech was even picking on T right after he got shot, calling him my Cyclops brother. But all jokes aside, like I've said in other videos, Meech was the only person Terry has ever felt comfortable enough to let his guard down around. He has never been able to be himself around his family like Meech has because he chose to hide the fact that he was in the game, unlike Meech who never hid who he was from his family. And with LaWanda, T never let his guard down around her either, going back to season 1 right after he was shot. And now we see even around Markeisha that Terry's letting her to believe that he's something he's not by letting her think that he smoked Saint himself. So one thing to keep an eye on moving forward is the dynamic of the relationship between Sterling and T and how that plays out. One of the other dynamics that the scenes from Meech and T's childhood key in on is the fact that the two brothers were always fighting. Again, something that is definitely not uncommon between two brothers. But this is something that will also continue throughout the course of their relationship as well. In season 1, Meech and T were arguing when B. Mickey told them all he ever sees them do is fight. Don't they do any brotherly, like hug, when both the brothers turned around and told B. Mickey to shut up. Then fast forward all the way to the 2007 scene shown in episode 1 of season 3. The two brothers are facing trial and it had been over 2 years since they last spoke to each other. And the two had different opinions of how they got there. T thought it was because Meech was too flashy and at the clubs throwing all that money is why they got locked up. But the real reason why they got locked up was T talking all his business over the phone and the feds picking it up on wiretaps. Now, one thing has been said about those wiretaps is that when people would talk to T, they would address him as boss or sir. Like I said earlier in the video, T was a no-nonsense type of guy. Da Vinci even said in an interview that T was a no-nonsense type of guy to the point of being churlish. Now, personally, I had to look that word up and it means rude in a mean-spirited and unfriendly way. And we began to see this just a little bit in episode 1 when he got mad that Hoop was reporting back to Meech and grabbed him and pushed him against the gate. So at some point, we're going to see T starting to make that turn. Keep in mind that in the trailer, he says, quote, "I'm not my brother." Getting me back to the jail scene from 2007, and what did the brothers start doing just after a few seconds of conversation? They got in each other's faces and started yelling at each other. Keep in mind, Meech said in season 2 that T tries to act like he's the older brother. One of the primary reasons the two were always bumping heads, like Meech told Terry as he left Detroit, there can only be one king. Then keep in mind, eventually, BMF is going to split into two separate factions. Meech's side remaining BMF and T's crew that will be called 263. At the end of season 2, as Meech was leaving Detroit to move to Atlanta, OG Terry said when Meech left, we thought nothing would change. Needless to say, it did. When Meech left for Atlanta, the last thing the two brothers said to each other was "womb to the tomb." But obviously the two began growing apart. Keep in mind that as kids, Meech and Terry bonded through the drug game and going through adversity together. But now each one of them was doing their own thing, and the more T gets a taste of running things his own way, the less he's going to want Meech involved in his side of the business. Getting me to the final way that the brothers bonded, going through adversity together, and the restoration of their relationship. Like I mentioned earlier, it had been 2 years since Meech and Terry last spoke before the prison scene. And there are some dark reports from around this time as well that Terry actually discussed taking out Meech because the fact that Meech was so flashy and partying so much, and when Meech put up the BMF billboard, Terry about lost it. Then over the last 15 to 20 years, the brothers again had to go through adversity, somewhat together again, either though not being locked up in the same facility, but at the end of the day, their relationship is restored and the story isn't over. Terry was released a couple years ago and Meech will begin released in a few months. And there you have it. Leave your thoughts, theories, and predictions in the comments.